listening to the Chapter a Day Bible Study. I'm John Stange, and today we're in 1 Kings 7. Solomon builds his palace and furnishes the temple. 1 Kings 7 continues the account of Solomon's great building projects. After chapter 6 described the construction of the temple, chapter 7 turns first to Solomon's own palace complex, and then it returns to the temple to describe its elaborate furnishings. The chapter's filled with architectural details, measurements, bronze work, and sacred objects. And these details do a nice job of emphasizing the glory of Israel's kingdom under Solomon and the importance of approaching God according to his design. They also anticipate something greater, the coming of Jesus Christ, the true king through whom God dwells with his people. The chapter begins by telling us that Solomon spent 13 years building his own house. His palace complex included the House of the Forest of Lebanon, the Hall of Pillars, the Hall of the Throne, and separate living quarters for Solomon and Pharaoh's daughter. These structures demonstrated the wealth and the power and the stability of Solomon's kingdom. Verse 1 says, Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished his entire house. The contrast with the temple is interesting. The temple took 7 years to build, while Solomon's palace took 13. Now, the text doesn't explicitly criticize Solomon for this, but the description reminds us just how prosperous his reign had become. Solomon wasn't ruling from a modest residence. He was a powerful king surrounded by impressive architecture and extraordinary wealth. And yet Solomon's kingdom, impressive as it was, wouldn't last. His buildings could communicate power, but they couldn't guarantee faithfulness. His wealth couldn't protect his heart from eventually wandering away from God. Well, Jesus presents us with a very different kind of king. He possessed all the glory of heaven, and yet he entered our world in humility. Christ even said of himself, "The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." He said that in Matthew 8:20. Solomon displayed royal glory through magnificent buildings. Jesus displayed divine glory through humility, obedience, sacrifice, and ultimately his resurrection. The second half of 1 Kings 7 returns to the temple, and it introduces a skilled craftsman named Hiram, whom Solomon brought from Tyre. Verse 14 says, "He was full of wisdom, understanding, and skill for making any work in bronze. He came to King Solomon and did all his work." Hiram created some of the temple's most recognizable furnishings. Among them were 2 enormous bronze pillars that were placed at the entrance of the temple. Solomon named one Jachin and the other Boaz. Jachin likely communicates the idea that he establishes, while Boaz carries the sense of in him is strength. Anyone approaching the temple would pass between these imposing reminders that Israel's security ultimately came from the Lord. Hiram also constructed the great bronze basin called the Sea. In verse 23, we read this, "Then he made the sea of cast metal. It was round, 10 cubits from brim to brim, and 5 cubits high." The sea rested on 12 bronze oxen and held an enormous quantity of water. Now, this water was used by the priests in connection with ceremonial cleansing. Hiram also constructed 10 bronze stands and 10 basins, along with numerous pots and shovels and bowls. All this washing points to a fundamental biblical truth. Sinful people need cleansing before a holy God. The priests couldn't just approach their duties however they wanted to. Their repeated washing illustrated the separation between God's holiness and human sinfulness. But the water in Solomon's temple could only provide ceremonial cleansing. It couldn't cleanse the human heart. Jesus provides the cleansing that the temple rituals only illustrated. Through his sacrificial death, Christ deals with our guilt completely. In fact, in Hebrews 10:22, we're told that believers have our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. meaning that what the priests repeatedly pictured through washing, Jesus actually accomplished through his blood. The chapter then concludes by describing the golden furnishings that Solomon placed inside the temple. We see the altar, the table for the bread of the presence, lampstands, bowls, cups, fire pans, and some other sacred objects. Verse 51 says, "Thus all the work that King Solomon did on the house of the Lord was finished." Now, this statement marks the completion of an enormous undertaking. David prepared for the temple, Solomon constructed it, and skilled craftsmen furnished it. Everything was now ready for the Ark of the Covenant to be brought into the temple. And yet, even this magnificent structure wasn't God's final dwelling place among humanity. The temple was pointing forward. Again, the Apostle John tells us that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We see that in John 1:14. In Jesus, God's presence wasn't contained behind walls of cedar or walls of stone. God himself came to live among his people. And that makes the details of 1 Kings chapter 7 more significant than they probably initially appear. The pillars proclaimed strength and establishment. Well, Jesus is the one who establishes his people and gives them eternal security. The bronze sea provided water for ceremonial cleansing. Well, Jesus provides complete cleansing from sin. The golden lampstands filled the temple with light, but Jesus declares, "I am the light of the world." He said that in John 8:12. And the bread of God's presence reminds us of Jesus, who said, "I am the bread of life." He said that in John 6:35. Solomon's temple was glorious, but its glory was temporary. Eventually, the Babylonians would destroy it. The bronze would be carried away, the gold would disappear, and the kingdom Solomon built would collapse. But Jesus gives us something no earthly king or earthly temple could provide. His kingdom can't be destroyed. His sacrifice never needs to be repeated, and his presence with his people will never end. 1 Kings 7 shows us Israel at one of the most impressive moments in its history. Solomon's kingdom was prosperous, and his palace was magnificent, and the temple was filled with beautiful craftsmanship. But every earthly structure eventually fades. The chapter ultimately directs our attention beyond bronze and gold and cedar and stone. It directs our attention to Jesus Christ, the greater Son of David. In him we find our King, we find our cleansing, we find our light, we find our strength, and we find the permanent presence of God with his people. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Chapter a Day Bible Study. For more resources to help you in your walk with Christ and your understanding of the Bible, please visit my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And if you'd like to partner with me by becoming a supporter of this ministry, you'll see a few options to do so, again, at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com or in the description of this episode. As always, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your support, and thank you for your willingness to share this content with others. Have a great day, and I'll see you again right here tomorrow.